Hello and welcome to the Connected Community Podcast. Today, my guest is Mike Martin, who is a certified meditation guide, a wilderness first responder, and a survival skills trainer. Mike is not one of those typical guys that you conjure up in your head when you think about meditation. And he was really having this dark night of the soul. He was suffering with anxiety, severe isolation, depression, and he had this dark night of the soul moment when he went out in the woods and he had a failed suicide attempt. It was at that point that he decided to seek emotional support and guidance, and he went to a therapist. The therapist decided to talk to him about meditation, and Mike thought there was no way that this is something that would resonate with him. And through diligence of that therapist, he was able to see that he was already doing moments of mindfulness and meditation when he was out hunting and he was out in nature. And so he really dove into this practice and it absolutely changed his life. He crawled out of this hole of depression and social anxiety and isolation. And now he has his own podcast and he takes people on these journeys where they can find mindfulness, meditation out in nature. And it's connecting with nature, and it doesn't have to be what you think. It can be slow meditative movements. It can be walking. It can be hiking. It can be walking meditations and so much more. So we really explore this topic of mindfulness and meditation out in nature. And I hope that you find some inspiration from this podcast. Please, if you do, take a moment to give us a like, a share, and a subscribe. And I want to thank you so much for being here today. Enjoy. Hello, and welcome to the Connected Community Podcast, a place to explore possibility through mindfulness, movement, and self-discovery. Our intention is to deliver insight and inspiration while fostering conversations that are genuine, unfiltered, and deeply human. We hope you will enjoy today's episode. Hi, Mike. Welcome to the Connected Community Podcast. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm definitely looking forward to the conversation. I think it's going to be very insightful and very helpful.
It is. It is. I want to hear just a little bit about who you are. So from what I know, that you are a wilderness first responder and a survival skills trainer and then a certified meditation guide. And a lot of times those don't go hand in hand. So how did you get into all three of those? Let's start with that.
Well, actually, it all spins around the meditation part with
Okay.
getting into the wilderness, and the rest of it was kind of things that I felt were needed for when I took people out into the field. The reason that I emphasize the outdoor skill set is because it helped me to rebuild my self-worth and my self-value. And then obviously the first responder thing, if something happens, you gotta have somebody there that can take care of things. So it just made sense.
Yeah. And so one of the things that you do is that you take people on these journeys through the woods for meditation or mindfulness retreats or experiences. Is that right?
I do a combination of classes, day hikes, or long backpacking trips. So it's really whatever that individual feels that they're ready to tackle or try.
Mm.
And just, I've custom the experience to fit their skill level and their ability.
Yeah. So, I want to talk about your being a certified meditation guide because you don't fit the stereotype for a meditation guide. And a lot of people, when they think about somebody meditating, they think about somebody sitting on a rock on a river with a top bun with their hands in prayer. Not really, but like a lot, you don't fit this, especially the typical male stereotype for someone that's into meditation. So, how did you stumble upon meditation?
Well, I stumbled onto meditation in a conversation through talk therapy, but I really love the analogy that you put around it because we all had those kind of stigmas around the idea of meditating. I had the same ones. I spent that hour arguing with her that that's not me. I'm not shaving my head. I'm not going to sit there and go,
Hmm.
and I'm definitely not going to look for one of those 1998 chant CDs.
Hmm.
But then, after we got done, I went around back and I did my nightly shooting practice, and lo and behold, she was right. Every single thing that she talked about, I was doing in order to shoot. So to me, it just kind of made sense, and when I thought about the rest of the conversation and how it can actually help you to slow down and process your actions a little bit better and gain more control over your life, I thought, okay, I can do this. That's pretty
Mhm.
cool. And I still had that stigma that I was putting on other people that they're going to judge me.
Mhm.
They're going to look at me and go, "You're stupid. Go shave your head, whatever." So I had to step outside of that, and in order to do so, I took meditation into the place that I'm the most comfortable, and
Mhm.
that's the wilderness. When you get out there and you walk, you're actually engaging in a form of walking meditation,
Yeah.
and then you start to be able to sit down later and connect just because you're tired even,
Mhm.
and just sit with your thoughts. And one thing that I found that it's really done for me is it's changed the context of how I go out into the wilderness. The isolation of being out there was something that I didn't enjoy because I was afraid of myself and the thoughts that would come up. But as I've gotten more and more involved with the practices that I do, it's not only become more comfortable and more helpful with sitting in the isolation, but it's also taught me to look at the resources around me and see what's going on, observing and being able to gain insight into my own life and my own self.
Mhm. Yeah. What did that therapist say to you in that session that you realized you were already doing, like when you were going out and doing your target practice? What clicked in for you and resonated with you?
Simply the breathing, because you got to
Mhm.
control your breathing, and
Yeah.
then slowing down your thoughts so you could focus.
Yeah. So you're like, I'm already partially meditating. I'm just not calling it that.
Exactly. And the other part that tied into was a couple weeks later when I was out in the deer woods. As men and hunters, we go out there thinking we got to stand perfectly still because something's going to see us. So we're afraid of the result if we move. But we never realize that we're actually utilizing those practices in a way that if we change the context could actually help us.
Mhm. And so how did you change the context? What do you mean?
Sitting down on a rock and just observing what was going on. I'll give you a great story from a hunt a couple years ago. I was really struggling with my social anxiety at the time, and
Mhm.
it was November 15th, which is the height of the rut or deer breeding season. Very, very miserable, cold day. There was a little bit of a blizzard, and temperatures were just freezing. And this deer come through that I had never seen before, and I never take a deer that I have not had some kind of connection with and seen before. And so I gave him a pass, and I'm standing there thinking to myself, it's brutally cold out here. I call myself a hunter. What am I doing? I could just take this deer simply and go home and warm him
Mhm.
up and everything else. But then I thought about the anxiety in relation to Longhorn, as I named him. On this particular day, he was out putting himself at risk in a life and death situation, in order to do his job, further his species. But he relied on the fact that in the back of his mind, he knew if he came up against a threat, he had the skills and the abilities to defend himself or get away, whatever he needed to do. So, how that ties into my anxiety is the things we do in life isn't always life and death, but anxiety can make it feel that way.
Mhm.
So, watching Longhorn, if he was able to still further do his job, it meant by taking that same frame of mind and trusting in yourself, even though that panic attack is going on, you could still achieve whatever it is that you were out there trying to do. You didn't have to
Mhm.
just stop and sit down in a corner and just give up.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what led you to this whole practice? Like what's the story? Like how did you get into counseling? What was going on in your life? Like why did you feel like this was something necessary that you needed to bring into your existence?
Well, that comes from a botched suicide attempt after my second divorce while I was homeless. The last thing that she had said to my face in our last conversation was, I had nothing to offer her, and I had nothing to offer my kids. And that night after the conversation, whether it was the pills that I took that didn't work or just the temperatures weren't cold enough for hypothermia, I survived.
Mm-hmm.
I woke up the next day kind of in a fog, stumbled back to my truck, turned on a hunting podcast that I listen to religiously. And the Stoic author Ryan Holiday just happened to be the guest that day. And he started talking about these different quotes from the Meditations by Marcus Aurelius that took those words that were thrown at me the night before that stripped me of all my self worth and value and flipped it all upside down.
Mm.
Because the most important thing to me is being a father.
Yeah.
And if I could rebuild from being homeless and totally broken and destroyed
Mm-hmm.
to getting back on my feet and everything, not only would that change the definition of who I was in their eyes, but it would teach them, more importantly, a lesson that the adversities that we face in life are things that we can overcome. And the reason we're able to overcome them is because it gives us the opportunity to highlight and showcase who we are deep inside. Even if we
Mm-hmm.
don't know it yet, it gives you an
Yeah.
opportunity to learn and discover that.
So your motivation was, I want to be a good dad. I want to show my kids that I'm resilient, that I can get through this, that I can be better and stronger. Yeah.
110%.
Yeah. That's a great motivation. And so that led you to counseling sessions, right?
That led me to exploring the idea of talk therapy and counseling.
Yeah.
It was a process to find the right one,
Yeah.
but once I did, it was magical.
Yeah. Did you have to break through this like barrier of even just going and speaking to a counselor, or were you fine with like, okay, I need this, I'm going to go, or did you have to get over some kind of mindset thing around that?
I think it was a combination of the two.
Mm-hmm.
Like half of me was okay, I'm where I'm at. I can't necessarily solve this all on my own right now.
Mm-hmm.
I need help. But then there was, of course, that ego and that pride that says, you don't need help. You can just do it anyway.
Yeah.
But then I referred back to that moment sitting in the truck in the rearview mirror going, this isn't working. You keep
Yeah.
repeating the same thing in order to hide from your depression, to hide from your anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
So just put your head down and take that step. And it was actually probably one of the best decisions that I had ever made.
Yeah. Sounds like it was. Yeah. How deep were you into your therapy when you discovered meditation?
It wasn't very deep. I think it was probably only a couple of months into it.
Mm-hmm.
So she was still working past the trust factors and all those other wounds that were there when she finally came out with that. And at that point, there was still a lot of things that she was throwing out that I was like, this is coming out of left field and completely foreign to me. And I don't think it resonates, but lo
Mm-hmm.
and behold, every time she throws something at me, it stuck and it actually worked.
Yeah. And so she brought up meditation, and then you realized in a lot of ways you were already doing a meditation. So you just kind of changed your mindset around meditation. Is that how it worked for you?
That was exactly it. It was kind of like a trial by fire. Somebody gives you an idea and you put it up to the test and see if it really works for you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting when you talked about that of walking meditation. Right when you said that, I triggered this thought of I used to backpack at the Grand Canyon. It was like 4 days, 10 miles a day. And I remember just thinking about my footstep. Like that's all I could think about was my next step and my next step and my next step. There was nothing else in my head. And I'm like, I can do this. And also, I've done intentional walking meditations where I've done it in a retreat or something situation where we've walked really slowly. So, from like our heel all the way to our toe, and like one step at a time, and just feeling the earth and feeling how the pressure of the foot hits the ground in different ways. Turning something simple and every day into this like really mindful process helps get us out of our head and connected to our body and connected to earth. And I'd love to hear what that experience is like for you, if there's some similar veins in there or if it was different.
bringing in that meditative part of it and that mindful aspect of it is opened up more the observation aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
So all the physicalness of it, the connecting with the ground, things like that, it's always been there with the change in the perception.
Mm-hmm.
So I view it more nowadays as the support system. Like if you were to think about how we all had this capacity for our feelings before we finally blow over. You know, if you use anger for an example,
Mm-hmm.
somebody can only take so much before they end up finally expressing that anger.
Right.
So I when I'm out on the trail, I look at it more as I have that capacity, I'm aware of it, but if I take the physical metaphors around me and I apply them into my thoughts and go through a couple of different steps, I can relieve myself of that. I
Mm-hmm.
can let that stuff go. And I do it a lot through, especially at the beginning of a hike, where I'll kneel down and I'll pick up a handful of grass and just kind of let my thoughts and my feelings all come to the front and almost take shape into that bundle of grass that I'm holding. And after I've examined it and I've taken the time to process it, I put it back down on the ground,
Mm-hmm.
leaving those feelings behind with Mother Earth. So that's where it really comes
Mm-hmm.
through to me, is through the practices that I've developed.
Can you give like a more concrete example using that grass and like picking it up and what is going through your body and your thoughts and your feelings and kind of just going a little bit deeper into that example?
Well, what I do is, when I pick it up, I sit there for a minute and observe how I'm feeling emotionally
Mm-hmm.
and how the past couple of weeks have been. It's almost a comparison to a journaling practice
Mm-hmm.
where you pull the reflection out, you put it into words. Well, this instead of putting it into words on a paper, each individual piece of grass is taking up one of those feelings, one of those thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And then I get the time to examine it deeper, just like if you were to write it on a page. And when you finish with it, it's sitting there. It's written on the written words on the page, and I start to just let it go, and I can feel it actually start to leave my body, leave
Mm.
my mind, and then when I place it back down on the earth, I no longer have anything to do with it.
Mm.
And a
So are
lot
you
of
feeling the feelings too? Are you feeling all the different emotions or are you thinking about circumstances where they've come out?
I do kind of a complete circle of it, but it's almost from like a third person point of view.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the feelings, and I reflect on the experience of it, how I felt in the moment, and then I can walk through the scenario that brought it up. But I try my best to do it in a very non-biased kind of frame of mind. So instead of getting worked up over something that happened to me 2 days ago that I'm trying to let go of, I watch kind of the way that it came up through me, the way the feelings were there, and the way that they ended up expressing themselves, and then seeing if I can learn a little something from it.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's always a lesson to be learned out of things that happen. So next time I'm in that situation, what can I do to put a little bit more of a gap between the stimulant and the response?
Yeah.
And then after I go through that process, that's where it's then visually within my mind, I can see it in the grass, and then it goes back down to the ground.
Yeah. So it's a lot of like contemplation and self-reflection and then releasing and letting go.
Yeah, absolutely.
It sounds like you came up with that practice on your own that works for you, or did you learn that somewhere?
I kind of developed the actual practice that I do on my own, but I took the idea and the inspiration from one of Seneca's writings,
Mm-hmm.
where he talked about every moment that's lived, after we've lived it, it's no longer ours. Death has taken it from us.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, you shouldn't look back on it and hold it, because
Mm.
there's nothing there left to hold.
Yeah. Yeah. And then what are some of the practices that you do when you're taking people on these outdoor journeys?
Well, I think one of my favorite is gets back to walking meditation, because a lot of the time people will come to me under the premise of the adventure. This is just going to be a lot of fun and games. And when we start talking about what's going to happen, they look at me in a state of shock. They're like, I can't do that. I can't
Mm-hmm.
sit still and
Yep.
all those things. And then I get to kind of coach them up a little bit and tell them, in all reality, we're going to start walking real quick first. A couple miles down the line, that's where we're going to do all the stuff we're talking about now. By the time we get there, you're going to be kind of tired. You're going to be excited about sitting down. So at that point, I can walk you through all that. But right now, we're going to focus on this walking meditation. At some point, we're going to sit still for about 20 minutes and we're going to walk through our thoughts and our feelings. That's pretty scary and nerve wracking. So as they get in, as they ease into the flow of a walking meditation at the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
it's really fun to watch that hamster wheel, per se,
Yeah.
start to slow down.
Yeah.
And then you get them to that point where we're resting and we walk through a nice long guided meditation and they stand up at the end of it and they look at you so amazed that they could actually go through with it.
Mm.
It's a very fulfilling and satisfying feeling.
Yeah, because they didn't think that they'd be able to sit with themselves or sit still,
Right.
or that they'd be able to even calm their mind for a moment, right? Because the monkey mind's going so strong that they probably didn't think that they could ever stop it for just a second.
When those apprehensions come up and they're caught up in the I can't do this, I can't do that part of it, really focusing in on the fact that no two meditation practices ever look the same when they're executed,
Mm-hmm.
it starts to make them feel a little bit more comfortable because
Yeah.
you're starting to help them understand that they don't have to judge themselves based on what that person next to them is doing or even what I'm doing.
Yeah. Because every time they sit down, it's going to be different. It's going to look different.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a meditator, and sometimes I meditate and my mind is going 100 miles an hour, and other times it's a lot more quiet. But it's observing. It's not really like the point isn't to shut the mind up or to stop it from running. It's just to observe it when it is doing that, right?
Exactly. And, you don't have to sit still to do that. I mean, we all have practices within the course of our day, within
Mm-hmm.
our routine that give us those opportunities.
Yeah. I would think swimming would be a really good one because it's kind of quiet and it's repetitive.
True. Very
Yeah.
true. I was going to go with one of the practices that I do that people seem to really get intrigued by, and that's fire keeping.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
so building a fire from scratch all the way from the embers up to the flame, there's a process that goes through that. And as people watch it, or as they get open and want to volunteer to try to help, going through and actually building the tinder bundle, breaking the sticks, getting everything ready, it shows them that, in movements, there is that opportunity to just connect with yourself. If you really take time to put the emphasis on the ritual and the intention of your movement,
Yeah.
whether it's sitting down and actively meditating or some kind of movement, you're still achieving the exact same goal.
Yeah. I think Thich Nhat Hanh has a book about this, about like, doing this mindfulness practice while washing dishes. Like it doesn't have to be something crazy. It can be something as simple as washing our dishes.
That's the fun part of it.
Yeah.
And that's where I feel like being so outside the box with it, it really is not only enjoyable for me for the reaction, but seeing the overall response of the work and the fact
Hmm.
that it's enough to actually get somebody not only thinking about these things that can help them, but also seeing when they start to do it, their reaction.
Yeah. Yeah. Because if you can experience that, if you've never experienced that, and then you have a moment where your mind is quiet or still and you never thought it could be, that's pretty profound.
It definitely is. I mean, I remember my moment, when I realized that there was much more to life than hiding from depression or trying to mute who I was because I was ashamed of those things, those labels that people
Hmm.
are so quick to tie to who you are, and you buy into them so fast that it becomes your identity. there's a story that I tell all the time. If you've got, if we've got the time, I'd love to share that story because it is
Yeah, I'd
kind
love
of
to
a,
hear it. Yeah.
it's kind of a personal adaptation to how I faced depression.
Mm-hmm.
A long time ago, I was sitting in the house minding my own business when depression knocked on my door. So I opened the door, and he pushed his way in, and then he hung out for a couple of days, told me how to behave, what to do, what to say,
Mm-hmm.
and then he got up and he left. Didn't say goodbye, nothing like that. He come back a couple of weeks later, and he knocked on the door and he brought some groceries with him. This time, when he forced his way in, he took everything that I like to eat out of my kitchen and replaced it with the things that he liked to eat.
Mm-hmm.
Said this is the way it is now.
Yep.
He enjoyed his stay, beating me up for a few more days, and then he left and come back and a couple weeks later, and this time when I opened the door, he had a suitcase and pushed his way into my bedroom, went to my closet, took all of my camouflage clothes out of my closet, replaced them with his black clothes, and said, "This is the way it is now."
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a minute, but that particular visit, I realized what depression was doing. So I sat down at the table and I said, depression, we got to talk.
Mm-hmm.
And he sat down and I told him, listen, I understand that you like to come here. I understand that you need to be here at times, and that's okay. But we can no longer do things the way you want to do them.
Mm-hmm.
So from now on, we're going to do things my way. And he didn't like that at the time, but at that point, depression stood up and he looked at me and he said, "You respect me?" And I told him, "Yeah." And he looked at me and said, "I respect you too." And then he got up and he left.
Hmm.
The next time that he came over, I opened the door. We sat down at the kitchen table, had a cup of coffee, talked for a couple hours, and I looked at the clock and I told him, depression, it's time to go. And with that, he got up, he thanked me, and he left, and we became friends after that. And to me, this whole mindful practice that we get into, that is the ultimate goal, is to stop having that vocabulary of shame or
Mm-hmm.
telling ourselves that we need to live in the story of self suffering. It's about the idea of building a friendship with who you are inside and being able to not fight against the current or fight against those feelings that you have because we're the only ones that actually bear the scars of
Yeah.
that fight. We get the bruises. The feelings, the emotions, they come and go as they choose.
Mm-hmm.
They don't carry anything that we physically feel or we have to experience. So if we're able to actually sit down at that coffee table and have that coffee with our feelings, almost see them as another person, another
Yeah.
face, then it becomes a lot easier to go from silencing and living in shame
Yeah.
to taking off that mask and moving forward and living a productive
Mm-hmm.
and healthy kind of life.
And it's building a relationship with those feelings despite how we want to label them as positive or negative, right? They just are almost like all equal. Instead of pushing away the ones that we don't want to feel, is embracing them and bringing them in and welcoming them.
And that gets back to that bundle of grass practice because
Mm-hmm.
you've got everything there as unbiased as it can be, and you see the grass in front of you, just like the plant that's behind you.
Mm-hmm.
There's different shades of green within that context, but they all flow together,
Yeah.
and that brings balance to the circle of life. Realizing that as we move through life, we are the center of that circle, yeah, but our feelings come and go, and we rely on those in order to process and experience. Because if we didn't have the good feelings or the good experiences without the bad feelings or experiences, there'd be no reason to enjoy those good ones. There'd be no
Yeah.
variety.
Yeah. Right. They'd be really boring.
Absolutely.
Have people noticed the shift in you? Have the people closest to you and your family noticed a change?
There's been a massive change. There's been a massive shift in not only the outlook that I have, but the way that I engage the world. I talked earlier, I mentioned about my social anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
and it was very, very severe. To the point that when I was really struggling with everything was during COVID. You'd have to go through a drive-through to order food. Being homeless, that was the easiest way to eat. But I couldn't make a decision, let
Mm.
alone tell somebody what it was that I'd like.
Yeah.
So there'd be many days that I'd go without eating. And the other part of that was, as I started to get settled back into life, I spent most of my time in a little, I don't know if you're familiar with those pop up hub ice shanties
No.
that are utilized for ice fishing. Well, that was pretty much what I
Oh,
called,
yeah. I know what you're talking about. Yes.
that was kind of what I called home.
Mm.
It was like pulling teeth to get me out of that thing.
Mm.
And it was just life for me that was comfortable. It's just the way it was. The isolation was everything. In fact, I think I just recently gave myself credit for the fact that I've stopped hiding within my little tent or my little ice shanty and actually come out and really embrace the world. And that's another thing that people have commented on the shift for me is I never give myself the credit that I
Yeah.
deserve. It's something that's taken me a long time to say, okay, I did it. I'm proud of myself. And
Yeah. What about your kids? What have they noticed?
I've definitely been very, very much more engaged mentally and emotionally. And to turn the wheel back a little bit further, because this is kind of an important aspect of that response, I guess, is like I mentioned, that was my second divorce. The first divorce, I had a daughter, and because of the shame and everything that I put on myself when it failed, I lost touch with her.
Mm-hmm.
Well, through healing and through getting myself back centered, I reached out, I found her and reconnected with her, and
Mm.
we've actually built a very good relationship out of things.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. If somebody's interested in connecting with nature and being mindful in nature and tapping into meditation, what advice do you have for them how to start that process or what tips they might be able to use?
I would say that whatever it is that's holding you back out of actually going and experiencing it, do it anyway. Just take it on very small increments. For example, getting out and walking around the block.
Hmm.
It doesn't have to be a major event. If you do something small and simple each day, you build up. But if you have that feeling or that call, that experience, that desire to get out there, just do it.
Hmm. And what would be a good starting point for the meditation piece?
Just understanding that having grace for yourself and giving yourself the understanding that you're only going to do what you're capable of doing at any moment is okay.
Hmm.
Because, like we mentioned before, sitting still for 5 minutes is hard.
Yeah.
If you can do it for 30 seconds one day, build it up to 45 seconds and eventually a minute, that's a
Yeah.
win. Celebrate
Start.
the little wins.
Yeah. Start small and then pat yourself on your back when you accomplish it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And tell us about the two podcasts that you have.
So, my podcast is called Project Mindfully Outdoors, which I started based off of what saved my life. Just that positive energy that was out there. And it runs 7 days a week. You can find it on Apple, Spotify, and every other podcast provider out there. And that's the motivation for it. Just a simple daily little positive message to help you continue to move forward. And twice a week, I spark up the meditative campfire and share a great conversation with two guests. And our whole goal is to help change that vocabulary that you're utilizing to go from the negative self-talk to building a vocabulary to help you live authentically the hero's journey.
Hmm. Yeah. And what's the wilderness experience?
So the wilderness experience is the in-person aspect of
Ah,
Project
okay.
Mindfully Outdoors.
Yeah.
That's the group hikes, the in-person group meditations, or the individual solo backpack trips, whatever the case may be. It's something that I keep very broad and open so that regardless of where you're at in life, it feels like something you can touch and can be crafted to authentically help you to get through to that next moment, as well as again build that vocabulary and that tool set that's going to help you to really live that hero's journey.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Mike. I wonder how people can connect with you. I'll put it all in the show notes, but what other offerings that you might have for people?
So I always do a free, what I call a trailhead call, which is a free first session to kind of walk you through some of the most basic aspects of meditation, as well as develop a plan that's going to really help you to move forward and rewrite that vocabulary and gets back to the hero's journey. And there's no pressure with it. If I can help you, great. If not, I'm sure I can find somebody else that can do more for you than I'd be able to. It's all about just authentically, you know, going forward, putting that energy back out there that's going to help.
Yeah. 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 Well, thank you, Mike. I appreciate you and your conversation. I love busting stereotypes and myths. So I really appreciate your presence today.
Well, thank you. It's been a lot of fun celebrating my journey and my work.
Thank you for listening to the Connected Community Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, share, and subscribe. I can be found at www.nickyyoga.com, NICKYYYOGA.com. Until I see you again next week, I hope you have a beautiful day.